The thing about silence is that it compounds, like interest in a savings account you never touch. 10 years of not saying the right thing becomes 20, becomes 30, until the wealth of all you've swallowed could buy a small country. I noticed the water first. 3 inches of it, black as night, lapping against the bottom basement stair. The storm had been raging for hours, but I'd been lost in spreadsheets, calculating next semester's tuition payments for the twins. When the power flickered and my screen went dark, I heard it. That gentle, persistent licking sound. Water finding its way home. "Liana," I called upstairs, but knew she wouldn't answer. Thursday nights she had book club, which meant wine with neighborhood women whose laughter came too easily and whose husbands existed in stories as punchlines. I stood alone on the steps, watching the tide of rainwater rise, feeling oddly calm. This was solvable, unlike most things. By 3 a.m., I'd bailed enough water to make a path to the circuit breaker. My shoulders burned. My socks were soaked black with the muck of whatever the storm had churned up from the drainage pipes. Cedar, earth, regret. When I finally crawled into bed beside Liana's sleeping form, she didn't stir. The next morning, she'd ask about the basement, and I'd say it was fine. Nothing to worry about. The lie would protect her from inconvenience, and me from the effort of explanation. That was 3 weeks ago, before I knew about the money, before the children stopped meeting my eyes at dinner. "Dad, Mom's home." Micah's voice carried from the front yard, bright with the eagerness he reserved for Liana. I looked up from my laptop where I'd been searching for contract bookkeeping work, anything to rebuild what was lost. Through the living room window, I watched my wife emerge from a car I didn't recognize. Silver, sleek, German. The kind of car that announces its price to the neighborhood without speaking. Ivy was already outside, circling it with reluctant admiration, her dark hair catching afternoon light. 17 and so much like her mother, but with something of me buried in there too. A watchfulness, a tendency to tally things. I closed my laptop and went outside. Oregon autumn air bit through my flannel shirt. The sky hung low and gray as wet cement. "What do you think?" Liana's smile was radiant as she gestured to the car. She wore her camel hair coat, the one she saved for parent-teacher conferences and dinner with clients. Her blonde hair was freshly highlighted, falling in waves I knew took 40 minutes to create. "It's new," I managed, feeling the inadequacy of my words, even as they left my mouth. "Certified pre-owned," she corrected, but her smile tightened at the corners. "The Volvo was on its last legs. This will be so much safer for picking up the kids." Micah ran his hand over the hood, entranced. "It's amazing, Mom." "Where did we?" I started to ask, but Liana was already talking over me, explaining the safety features to the twins. I caught Ivy's eye. Something passed between us. A question, maybe. Or just the shadow of one. Later, at dinner, silence expanded like a gas, filling every corner of our kitchen. Liana talked about her day at the real estate office, a property she might list next week, a client who was impossible to please. The twins picked at their food. I noticed Ivy watching me, a crease between her eyebrows that reminded me of myself at her age. "Dad," she said suddenly, "Mrs. Harriman said something weird today in econ." I looked up from my plate. "Oh." She said market volatility was making everyone nervous. Then she looked at me like, I don't know, like she felt sorry for me or something. Ivy's eyes narrowed. "Have you lost anything else important lately?" The kitchen went still. Even Liana's constant motion, the serving, the clearing, the wiping, paused. Micah stared at his plate, shoulders hunched as if preparing for impact. "What do you mean, Ivy?" I asked, though I already knew. The story had spread. Liana's version of events. "Nothing," she muttered, scraping her chair back. Forget it. After dinner, I did the dishes alone, as usual. Through the window above the sink, I could see my reflection floating ghost-like over the backyard. Behind me, in the glass, another figure appeared. They're upset, Liana said, arms crossed, leaning against the doorframe. They have a right to be. I placed another plate in the drying rack. About what, exactly? Don't do this, Patrick. Don't make me the bad guy for telling them the truth. They deserve to know why their college funds are nearly empty. My hands stilled in the soapy water. And what truth did you tell them? Liana sighed, that familiar sound that carried the weight of my failure. That you tried to play the market, that you thought you could outsmart the system, that $94,000 disappeared because you got careless. I turned then, dripping water onto the linoleum. That's not what? Her voice took on the edge I'd grown to recognize, the one that said this conversation was already over. Not fair? Life isn't fair, Patrick. The kids need to learn that. Now they have. She left me standing there, hands wet, words unformed. Outside, rain began again, tapping against the window like a forgotten friend asking to be let in. The library smelled of paper and possibility. I found Elise where she always was on Wednesday afternoons, behind the reference desk, reading glasses perched on her nose, silver-streaked hair twisted into a loose knot. We'd known each other since 3rd grade, when she pushed Tommy Winters into a mud puddle for stealing my lunch. Now, 39 years later, she was the only person in Sea Salt Cove who still remembered me before I became an afterthought in my own life. Patrick Granger, she said, smiling. Come to return those overdue books? Just needed somewhere quiet, I admitted, settling into the chair across from her desk. Elise studied me over her glasses. You look like fog's rolled in behind your eyes. Everything okay? I almost said yes, almost defaulted to the polite fiction I'd maintained for decades. Instead, I heard myself say, Liana told the kids I lost their college money. Elise's hands went still on her keyboard. Did you? No. The word felt foreign in my mouth. Director. True. Then who did? I stared at a globe on her desk, spinning it slowly with one finger. Continents blurred into oceans. She did. New car in the driveway proves it. Elise leaned back in her chair, the old wood creaking in protest. And you're just accepting that? Letting her tell that story? What's my alternative? Tell the twins their mother drained their accounts? Turn them against her? No, Elise said quietly. Tell them the truth so they can make their own choices. There's a difference. We sat in silence, punctuated by the soft tap of rain against the library's tall windows. Elise had divorced Frank 3 years ago, after finding plane tickets to Bali he'd booked for himself and his dental hygienist. She'd told me once that the worst part wasn't the betrayal. It was realizing she'd seen the signs for years and chosen to read them differently. Truth arrives slow sometimes, she said now, eyes on the rain outside. Like tidewater. First a drop, then a trickle. Then suddenly, you're neck deep. I nodded, thinking of the basement during the storm. How quickly water could change everything. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, I opened my laptop at the kitchen table. The house creaked and settled around me. I navigated to our bank accounts, entered the password, and pulled up 6 months of transactions, though I already knew what I'd find. January 12th, transfer from joint savings to Liana's personal account, $15,000. February 27th, transfer from education fund to joint savings, $25,000. March 4th, transfer from joint savings to Liana's personal account, $22,000. April 9th, transfer from education fund to joint savings, $30,000. April 11th, Transfer from joint savings to Liana's personal account. $27,000. And on it went. A perfect choreography of numbers. A ledger of betrayal. I rubbed my eyes, feeling the weight of all those digits, wondering if I told the truth, would anyone believe me? Or had I been silent so long that my voice no longer carried weight? Ivy's accusation at dinner echoed. Have you lost anything else important lately? Yes, I wanted to tell her. I've lost you, your brother, my voice, my place. And now, finally, the comfort of not knowing. My screen glowed in the dark kitchen, illuminating a notification I hadn't seen before. An email from the bank manager, addressed to both Liana and me, about unauthorized access attempts to the education fund accounts. Dated 3 months ago. I never saw it. Liana must have deleted it before I checked my inbox. I closed my eyes, remembering the night the basement flooded. How I'd stayed up alone, bailing water, fixing what was broken. Always alone. Always silent. A man defined by what he absorbed, never what he said. From upstairs came the sound of Ivy's bedroom door closing. A muffled argument between the twins. Micah's voice rising, then dropping away. The house settling back into uneasy silence. I closed the laptop, then opened it again. Resolution crystallizing in my chest like frost on a window. It was time they knew. Not just about the money, but about the man I'd been. The man I'd failed to be. Maybe then, in the wreckage, I could begin to find my voice. To speak not in numbers, but in truth. I closed the laptop, then opened it again. Resolution crystallizing in my chest like frost on a window. The kitchen clock ticked past midnight. The house had settled into that particular stillness unique to sleeping homes, a living quiet, punctuated by the refrigerator's gentle hum and the occasional creak of old wood adjusting to the night's cooling temperature. Outside, fog had rolled in from the ocean, pressing against windows like ghostly fingers seeking entrance. I sat motionless, letting my decision take shape, feeling its weight and contour. Morning would be too late. By then, familiar patterns would reassert themselves. Liana's certainty would harden the air around us. The twins would retreat further into their separate defenses, Ivy's cold anger, Micah's anxious placating. No, it had to be now, in this liminal hour when truth seemed less dangerous than it would in daylight. I sent identical texts to both their phones. Are you awake? Need to show you something. My office. The responses came quickly. First, Micah, then Ivy, more direct. Now? Yes, I replied. Important. I moved to my small office off the living room, a converted sunroom where cedar shelves held decades of financial records. This was my territory, the only space in our home Liana rarely entered. The twins called it the vault when they were younger, fascinated by the neat rows of binders and the desktop computer I used exclusively for our household finances. They stopped coming here around middle school, when spreadsheets became less magical than mysterious. Micah arrived first, hair mussed from his pillow, wearing the faded Star Wars t-shirt he'd slept in since freshman year. He hovered in the doorway, eyes darting around the room as if seeing it for the first time. Dad, what's going on? His voice cracked slightly, betraying his unease. Let's wait for your sister, I said, gesturing to the chair beside mine. Ivy appeared moments later, fully dressed in jeans and a hoodie, arms crossed over her chest. Her dark hair was pulled back in a hasty ponytail, exposing the wariness in her expression. She'd been crying. The slight puffiness around her eyes gave her away, but her stance was defiant. If this is about dinner, I'm not apologizing, she said, remaining in the doorway. It's not about dinner, I replied. It's about the money, your college funds. What really happened? Micah's posture stiffened. Ivy's eyes narrowed to suspicious slits. The tension in the room thickened like the fog outside. "Mom already told us," Ivy said. "You tried day trading or whatever. Made bad investments." "That's not what happened." My voice was steadier than I expected. "I need you both to sit down. Please." Micah immediately sank into the chair beside me. Ivy hesitated, then grudgingly took the ottoman in the corner. Neither looked at the other. They'd been fighting, I realized, something unusual for the twins who typically presented a united front against the world. I opened my laptop and turned the screen toward them. "This is our family banking portal. I've kept separate records of all transactions since you were born." I paused, noting how strange this sounded, like a confession. "It's what I do. Track things, make sure nothing gets lost." "Dad," Micah began, "you don't have to." "I do," I interrupted, surprising myself with my firmness. "I've been silent too long. Look." I navigated to the transaction history screen, filtering for the last 6 months. The evidence appeared in orderly rows: dates, amounts, account numbers, the stark poetry of financial betrayal. "Your college accounts were created when you were 3. Every birthday, Christmas, tax return, a portion went in, never missed a year." I scrolled backward through time, showing the steady accumulation. By last December, you each had $47,000, enough for state school, maybe with some loans. Not everything I'd hoped, but solid. "So, what happened to it?" Ivy's voice had lost some of its edge, replaced by genuine confusion. I selected January through April, highlighting specific transactions. "These transfers, first to our joint account, then to your mother's personal account. Not investments, not stocks, just taken." Micah leaned closer to the screen, his breathing shallow. That's almost all of it. $94,000 total," I confirmed. "The car in the driveway cost $68,000. The rest went to—" I hesitated, realizing I hadn't actually tracked where the remaining money had gone. "I don't know. Things your mother wanted." Ivy shot to her feet. "That's a lie. Mom wouldn't. She said you lost it." Her voice rose, trembling with the effort to maintain certainty. "Why would she take our college money? That makes no sense." I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I clicked to another screen, my email archive. This came from the bank manager 3 months ago. I opened the message. "Regarding unauthorized access attempts to Granger Education Fund accounts." "Mom said you got careless with passwords," Ivy insisted, but doubt had crept into her voice. "I use a separate authentication system for these accounts. Always have." I pulled out my phone, showing the security app. "Your mother needed both my password and this physical device to access those accounts." Micah was staring at the floor now, his shoulders curved inward. "But why would she say it was you? Why would she lie to us?" The question hung in the air, simple but devastating. I closed my eyes briefly, sorting through possible answers, discarding the ones that would hurt them most. "People tell stories they need to believe," I said finally. "Stories that make their choices seem justified." Ivy wasn't ready to surrender. "So you're saying Mom stole from us? That she's been lying about everything? And you've just been, what, sitting back watching it happen?" Her voice cracked on the last words, anger giving way to something more vulnerable. "No," I said. Then, reconsidering, "Yes. Both are true." I took a deep breath. "I noticed the first transfer in January. I confronted her. She said it was temporary, to help her brother with medical bills, that she'd replace it by summer." "Uncle Dean doesn't have medical issues," Micah said quietly. "He posts hiking pictures every weekend." "I know," I admitted, but I wanted to believe her. When the second transfer happened, I confronted her again. She... I paused, the memory still raw. She reminded me how she'd supported us after my layoff, said it was her turn to make decisions, that I didn't have the right to question her anymore. So you just gave up? Ivy's question was like a slap. I didn't fight hard enough, I conceded. I've never been good at that, raising my voice, demanding to be heard. It was easier to hope she'd stop, that we'd find another way to pay for college. I was wrong. A heavy silence filled the room. Outside, a foghorn sounded in the distance, low, mournful. The twins exchanged a look I couldn't interpret, some private communication passing between them. Micah broke first. She told me you ruined everything, he whispered, voice catching, that I might have to skip college because you got greedy. His eyes, when they met mine, were swimming with tears. I believed her. I've been so angry at you. The confession struck like a physical blow. I'd suspected, but hearing it confirmed made it real. I'm sorry, Micah. Not for what I didn't do, but for what I did. I let silence become my language. I thought I was keeping peace, but I was just... I struggled for the words. I was just being a coward. You should have told us sooner, Ivy said, but the accusation had softened. She sank back onto the ottoman, suddenly looking very young. I know. I've spent years thinking silence protected you both. I was wrong. I closed the laptop gently. I'm telling you now, because you deserve the truth. Not to turn you against your mother. Not to make you choose sides. Ivy gave a short, bitter laugh. Little late for that. What happens now? Micah asked, wiping his eyes with his shirt sleeve. I don't know, I admitted. I've saved about $12,000 since the layoff. It's in a separate account. Not enough, but it's something. We'll apply for financial aid, look into scholarships. I've started applying for bookkeeping contracts, work I can do from home. And Mom? Ivy's question hung in the air. That's between your mother and me, I said carefully. What you do with this information is your choice. I won't tell you how to feel. My phone buzzed on the desk. A text from Elise. Remember, what the tide brings back is never quite what the tide took away, but sometimes it's what you needed all along. I didn't respond, but felt a small warmth unfold in my chest, the sensation of being seen. Ivy stood abruptly. I need to think. She moved toward the door, then paused, turning back. You keep records of everything, right? Do you have proof it was really Mom? That she actually took the car money from our accounts? I nodded, pulling a folder from the shelf beside me. Inside were printouts of the bank transfers, and beside them, the receipt for the car purchase, date, amount, Liana's signature. I handed them to Ivy, who took the papers with uncharacteristic gentleness. I don't understand, she said, voice small. Why would she do this? I don't fully understand either, I admitted. Your mother has always needed more. More beauty, more recognition, more proof that her life matters. I hesitated. The answers you want, she's the only one who can give them to you. Micah stood too, moving to his sister's side. Something had shifted between them. A new awareness, a shared weight. I can't go back to my room right now, he said. Can't pretend this didn't happen. You can stay in my office tonight, I offered. The couch pulls out. Ivy shook her head. Number I needs space from this house. From her. She looked at her brother. Let's go to Luke's. His parents won't mind if we crash in the basement. Micah nodded, and the twins moved toward the door, a synchronized retreat. At the threshold, Ivy turned back. Dad? Yes? Thank you for finally telling us. Her voice was raw, stripped of its usual armor. I'm still angry, but not at you. Not anymore." They left without another word. I heard them gathering essentials upstairs, moving with the quiet efficiency of people trying not to wake someone. 15 minutes later, the front door closed with a soft click. I remained in my office, surrounded by the records of our family's unraveling, and perhaps its potential rebirth. Outside, the fog had thickened, turning the streetlights into hazy orbs. I thought about going upstairs, waking Liana, forcing a confrontation. But some truths needed time to settle. Some reckonings couldn't be rushed. Instead, I sent a text to the twins. "I love you both. Always here, no matter what." Ivy responded immediately. "We know." Simple words. But in them, I heard the beginning of something I'd thought lost forever. Trust, tenuous but real. A bridge across the silence I'd helped create. I turned off my laptop and sat in the dark, listening to the foghorn's distant call. A warning and a guide, both at once. The water was higher than usual that morning, lapping at the weathered pilings that supported my rental above Sea Salt Cove's only bait shop. Rain had been steady for 3 days, drumming against the roof in rhythms that sometimes lulled me to sleep, sometimes kept me awake with memories of another flood, one that had marked the beginning of the end. The knock came just after 7. 3 short raps, hesitant but determined. I opened the door to find Ivy and Micah huddled beneath a single umbrella, duffel bags at their feet, their faces a complex map of emotions I couldn't fully read. "Can we stay?" Ivy asked, her voice stripped of its usual defiance. "Just for a while?" I stepped back, opening the door wider. "As long as you need." The twins entered, bringing with them the scent of rain and something else, possibility perhaps. Micah surveyed the modest space, the kitchenette with its 2-burner stove, the fold-out couch, the small table by the window overlooking the harbor. "It's small," I said, suddenly self-conscious of the life I'd cobbled together in the month since leaving the house. "But the view is decent." "It's perfect," Micah said, dropping his bag. The sincerity in his voice made my chest tighten. Ivy moved to the window, watching raindrops chase each other down the glass. "Mom doesn't know we're here," she said. "She thinks we're at Luke's again." I nodded, not asking the questions that pressed against my throat. What happened? What changed? How bad was it? Instead, I opened the refrigerator. "I can make eggs," I offered. "Or we could walk to the diner when the rain stops." "Eggs are good," Micah said, some of the tension leaving his shoulders. He began unpacking his duffel bag, revealing a mess of clothing and school books. From a side pocket, he pulled out a small framed photo of the 4 of us, Liana, me, and the twins, taken at Cannon Beach 3 summers ago. I noticed how carefully my son placed it face down on the side table. The next 3 days passed in a careful dance of readjustment. I gave the twins my bedroom, making do with the pull-out couch. Each morning, I drove them to school before heading to the library, where Elise had helped me set up a temporary office for my fledgling bookkeeping business. Each evening, we returned to the apartment above the bait shop, where I cooked simple meals, pasta with jarred sauce, grilled cheese sandwiches, chili from my mother's recipe. It was on the 4th night, after a dinner of chicken soup and sourdough from the bakery down the street, that Elise appeared at our door, a folder tucked under her arm. "I brought those forms we talked about," she told me, then turned to the twins with a gentle smile. "And I thought you might need some help navigating the financial aid maze." Micah looked up from his calculus homework, confused. "Forms?" "For scholarship applications," I explained, "and to appeal your financial aid packages. Elise offered to help." I hesitated. "If that's okay with you both." Ivy, who had been quiet all evening, straightened. "We need to submit an appeal?" Elise settled at the table, opening her folder. Your situation has changed significantly. The financial information your mother submitted doesn't reflect your current reality. She glanced at me. We need to document everything properly. For the next 2 hours, we worked through forms, Elise explaining each section with the patience of someone who had spent a lifetime guiding people through complicated systems. I watched my children's faces as they absorbed this new reality, one where money was discussed openly, where numbers weren't secrets, but facts to be faced. "Will this even work?" Ivy asked finally, her pen hovering over the signature line of her third form. "Yes," Elise said simply. "Maybe not perfectly, but yes." Later that night, after Elise had gone and Micah had fallen asleep, I found Ivy in the kitchenette, making tea. The whistle of the kettle cutting through the stillness of 2 a.m. "Can't sleep?" I asked, keeping my voice low. Ivy shook her head, pouring hot water into 2 mugs. She handed one to me, a peace offering, an invitation. "Mom came to Luke's yesterday," she said, leaning against the counter. "She was different, not angry, worse." "Worse how?" "Sad, confused, like she couldn't understand why we weren't on her side." Ivy stared into her mug. "She kept saying she did it for us, that she was securing our future, that we'd understand someday." I felt the familiar ache, the pull between anger and compassion that had characterized my marriage for years. "And what did you say?" "Nothing at first. Then Micah started crying. I'd never seen him like that, not since we were little." Ivy's voice caught. "So I told her we knew. About the money, about the lies, about how she tried to make you the villain." The apartment was quiet enough that I could hear the soft lapping of water against the dock pilings below. "That must have been hard," I said finally. "The weird thing is, I think she believed herself, her own story." Ivy looked up at me, her eyes searching. "Is that possible? To lie so much you start thinking it's true?" I considered this, remembering all the times I'd told myself my silence was protection, not cowardice. "I think we all believe the stories we need to, even when they hurt us." "Like you did," Ivy said, not accusing but understanding. "With her." "Yes," I admitted, "like I did." We drank our tea in companionable silence, the harbor lights twinkling through the window like distant stars. Before returning to bed, Ivy brushed a quick kiss against my cheek, a gesture so unexpected, so reminiscent of her childhood self, that I found myself blinking back tears long after she'd gone. The following Wednesday, Liana appeared at the apartment door. She wore her camel hair coat, her blonde hair perfectly styled despite the coastal wind that had picked up that morning. I had been alone, reviewing invoices for the small fishing charter I'd recently signed as a client. "So, this is where you're hiding them," she said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. Her eyes took in the modest space, lingering on the twins' textbooks scattered across the table, Ivy's sweater draped over a chair. "Cozy." "They're not being hidden," I replied, closing my laptop. "They're at school. They'll be back around 4. Liana moved to the window, looking out at the harbor. "This is temporary, you know, this little rebellion. They'll come home eventually." "Maybe," I said, surprising myself with my calmness. "That's up to them." She turned, her expression hardening. "I've consulted a lawyer. The house is in my name. The new car, too. You've got nothing to offer them, Patrick. Nothing but this fisherman's shack." I absorbed the intended blow, letting it wash over me like the tide. "I'm offering them honesty," I said quietly, "and a chance to make their own choices." "Choices?" Liana laughed, but the sound was hollow. "They're children. They don't get to choose." "They're 17, Liana. In less than a year, they'll be legally adults." Adults who need college tuition, she countered, triumph flashing in her eyes. Which I can provide. Can you? I thought of the forms we'd completed with Elise, the small freelance jobs I'd secured, the modest savings I'd protected. We'll figure it out, I said simply. Together. Something in my tone, not defeat, not anger, but calm certainty, seemed to unsettle her. She moved closer, her perfume enveloping me in memories of our shared past. You've turned them against me, she said, her voice softer now, wounded. After everything I've done for this family. No, I said. I told them the truth. That's all. Truth, she echoed bitterly. Your version of it. Bank statements don't have versions, Liana. We stood there, inches apart, the weight of 2 decades between us. I waited for the familiar urge to apologize, to smooth things over, to accept blame to preserve peace. It didn't come. Instead, I said, the twins will be home soon. You're welcome to wait. Liana's expression shifted, hardening into something cold and familiar. Tell them I stopped by. Tell them I expect them home for dinner Sunday. Their real home. After she left, I returned to my invoices, but the numbers swam before my eyes. I texted Elise. Liana was here, trying to reassert control. I'm afraid this is just a temporary win. Her response came quickly. Maybe, but it's yours. 4 simple words. But in them, I found unexpected strength. That weekend, an email arrived from Bayshore Marina. They needed someone to overhaul their accounting system, reconcile 3 years of chaotic records. The job would last through summer, with potential for ongoing work. The attached contract offered a sum that, while modest, represented the first real stability I had known since my layoff. This is great, Dad, Micah said, reading over my shoulder. But their software is ancient. You should upgrade them to QuickBooks Online. I glanced at my son, surprised. You know QuickBooks? Micah shrugged. We covered accounting software in business tech last semester. I could help you set it up, if you want. I'd like that, I said, feeling something shift between us, something new taking root. On Sunday morning, when Liana's text arrived, I expect all of you for dinner at 6. The twins exchanged a look across the breakfast table. We're not going, Ivy said, buttering her toast with deliberate care. You sure? I asked. I don't want to put you in the middle. We're already in the middle, Micah pointed out. Have been for years, probably. Ivy nodded. Besides, we promised to help Elise reorganize the reference section today, and then there's that Marina software to set up. I sent a simple response to Liana. The children have other plans. I'll let you know when they're ready to talk. After breakfast, with the day stretched before us clear and bright, I suggested a walk along the shore. The twins agreed readily, and soon we were picking our way across the wet sand, the receding tide leaving behind a temporary canvas for our footprints. Micah found a perfect sand dollar and presented it to Ivy with exaggerated formality, making her laugh, a sound I realized I hadn't heard in months. Ivy collected smooth stones, lining them up in her palm before skipping them across the water's surface. We walked in companionable silence, the wind ruffling our hair, the sun warming our faces despite the April chill. I watched my children move ahead of me, noting how Micah's shoulders had lost their perpetual hunch, how Ivy's stride had regained its confidence. Dad, Micah called, pointing to a tide pool where starfish clung to the rocks, vibrant against the gray stone. Remember when you used to bring us here before school? We'd count how many we could find. 12 was the record, Ivy said, kneeling to examine the pool. We never beat it. Maybe today, I suggested, joining them. We counted together, voices overlapping, the simple pleasure of discovery momentarily eclipsing everything else. 10 starfish, not a record, but enough. As we continued our walk, I felt the weight of the past weeks, the confrontations, the tears, the uncertainty begin to ease. Not disappear, exactly, but transform into something I could carry without being crushed. There were still hard conversations ahead, college decisions, legal matters, the question of the house, the car, the remaining assets. There would be days when the silence between us returned, heavy with all we hadn't yet learned to say. But for now, walking between my children on the shore, watching them step carefully around tide pools and debris, I felt something unfamiliar unfurling in my chest. Hope, tenuous but real. A story not yet finished, but continuing. There were still pages missing in our story, but at least now we were writing them together, not in ink, but in breath and time, each word hard-won, and finally our own.